All right, in this video, I'm going to get into 9/11 and the Gelatin art group a little bit. But first, I want to focus real quick on this 60 Minutes interview done by CBS. Israel's spy agency Mossad spent years orchestrating Hezbollah walkie-talkie pager plots. And there's this quote from the interview that is unbelievable. I don't even know what to say other than I'm just going to read it and we'll go from there. We create a pretend world. We are a global production company. We write the screenplay. We are the directors. We are the producers. We are the main actors. And the world is our stage. Hopefully now you can see why I would say I don't even know how to respond. I mean, it's all right here out in the open. They're telling us what they are. And this is just Mossad. It's only one small part of the global spy apparatus, right? I mean, the CIA in America, MI6 in Britain, on and on it goes. Every country has their own version of this, and at the highest levels, they are all coordinating action together. Why is this important in the context of what I'm going to go over here? Well, in this interview, they tell you how methodical their planning was as it related to distributing these walkie-talkies and pagers to Hezbollah, knowing that they would detonate them at a later time, and the amount of patience that required, and just knowing the script in a way where they didn't prematurely use them. They waited knowing this war was going to come and give them the excuse to use them and inflict maximum damage with minimal blowback. Because, of course, it took place during a war. They were justified in doing this during this time. Knowing the script, knowing that October 7th was coming, in the same way that they knew 9/11 was coming, they patiently laid the foundation for this to eventually occur. In any event, I wanted to start there because we have instantaneously diffused the standard argument that I must be some kind of conspiracy theorist to suggest that there are people out there that know what is going to happen because they are the ones orchestrating it behind the scenes. They are the ones planning it and setting it in motion. They know what is coming, and in that way, they are script writers. Here you have an actual Mossad agent confirming it for us in an interview on 60 Minutes on CBS News, the original mainstream news in America. So, moving on. This is from USA Today, and it's an article that they like to run after the fact as it relates to these kind of things. There's an article that's similar where Robert Zemeckis says something along the lines of, well, the movie almost didn't happen, but these things just fell right into place and we were able to make it. And it's like, okay, Robert, we know that you always planned on making this movie 30 years later after Back to the Future, as it would tie into the larger 9/11 programming that you embedded intentionally into Back to the Future. So we know that this article is just for the consumption of the naive audience that doesn't know that you knew. So they put articles like this out after the fact that makes it seem like it was all just some giant coincidence. Oh yeah, we almost didn't even get Huey Lewis to make these songs for Back to the Future. It almost didn't happen. Let's tell you how crazy it was. How lucky we got that he actually decided to make the songs and it all fit perfectly to make these magical films. Anyways, Huey Lewis almost passed on going Back to the Future. Movies and their soundtracks don't always make for memorable bedfellows, but 30 years on, Back to the Future and its two defining Huey Lewis and the News songs continue to make perfect music together, with the toe-tapping latter inextricably linked to the eye-catching former. But the marriage almost didn't happen. When director Robert Zemeckis initially contacted Bay Area-based Lewis, the roots rock singer was inclined to take a pass. This is Huey Lewis talking. I had a meeting with Bob Gale, writer of the Back to the Future trilogy, and producer Steven Spielberg and Zemeckis. Zemeckis says, "We've just written this movie, and the lead character Marty McFly's favorite band would be Huey Lewis and the News." Zemeckis assured Lewis, whose 1983 smash album Sports was hot and on its way to eventual sales of 10 million copies, that he could come up with any song title he wanted. Lewis changed his tune. I told Bob Zemeckis that the next thing I wrote I'd send to him, recalls Lewis, 65, calling from his ranch in Montana, where he often fly fishes with neighbor Tom Brokaw. Speaking of mainstream news, you have Huey Lewis living right next to Tom Brokaw, and they fish together. Small world, right? So we wrote Power of Love. I had not read the script or seen the film, and they used it perfectly. I didn't even think it was going to work, so to their credit, it did. So you see, they make it seem like this grand coincidence. I didn't even know what the film was about. I didn't even see it. And I just wrote this song and then they used it perfectly because we're all artists and that's what artists do. We don't know anything that's going to happen. So they always kind of put this sort of thing out after the fact so that the coincidence theorists have something to cling on to and say, yeah, look, they didn't even know. He didn't even watch the movie. And you're going to say that he was somehow involved? Come on. But anyway, so this is from the promotional materials from the Power of Love single that was featured in the Back to the Future trilogy. And if you remember, the trilogy actually begins with this song. It's one of the first things that's played after the scene where he's setting the guitar up and blows out the speakers in Doc Brown's office. And it's just kind of interesting when you look at it in terms of what they are subconsciously doing with it, in the way that the lyrics to the song play on this idea of how important love is. But in the context of the trilogy, they are inverting love via their own creation, right? I mean, that's what the trilogy is doing. It's encoding this 9/11 mega ritual, which is a blood sacrifice. They murdered close to 3,000 people on that day, and then after the fact murdered a bunch more people who were involved in the cleanup and got exposed to all the chemicals and then had the massive health problems after the fact. This was a gigantic blood sacrifice ritual. It's easy to lose sight of that when you're discussing the symbolism surrounding it or the subconscious programming. Remember, they spilled actual blood on this day in this place, because that's all a part of the larger function of these events. For some reason, whoever or whatever is behind all of this requires blood sacrifice. There is no denying this at this point. When you look at everything that they do and how it somehow contains an aspect of blood being sacrificed. In the context of that, they sort of ironically make the theme song of the trilogy The Power of Love, where they tell you a lot of truth in the lyrics to the song about love being so much more important than anything else. You don't need money to ride that train, right? It's cruel sometimes, but it might just save your life. You know, this idea of love being the ultimate truth and how they sort of perverted on the level I was just going into. And then also they always associate it with romantic love as opposed to just love, which is unconditional truth. That which created us imbues us with it because we are made in its image. And so all of this programming is designed to invert it and move us away from that. And what is the ultimate way that you can remove someone from that? Well, you can subconsciously make them participate in a mega blood sacrifice ritual, which is what they did through this 9/11 programming. It's the antithesis of love, as it would be imbued within us from that which created us. It's the antithesis of truth, right? Because this is deception. So anyways, you can see here from the promotional material that the H in Huey and the U come together to form a 9/11. It's just the 9 is backwards, sort of in the way that the Harry Potter logo does it as well. But you can see here, all you have to do is flip this around, and it's a 9 with the twin towers, a 9/11 in the logo. And also, the way that they shaped this U makes it look like a flag as well. So you have this idea of a false flag, 9/11. And the news, because the news is going to play a huge role in making us believe the story that they will tell us about what happened on this day. Now, this imagery from Huey Lewis and the News actually comes from his 1982 album Picture This, where you can see they have the similar H and U logo here for Huey Lewis and the News, with the pyramid as the backdrop here, the capstone as it were. And the big picture then is that Huey Lewis must have some kind of connection to 9/11 in order for him to have been chosen to be in the 9/11 trilogy movie, right? They chose him for a reason. Let's see if there's any 9/11 connection here that we can easily identify. And you go up to his 2001 album Plan B, and we can start to get an idea of how he was connected into this. Plan B was released on July 24th, 2001. So this was released just a couple months before September 11, 2001. And you say, okay, what's the big deal? Huey Lewis released an album, Plan B, in July of 2001. I don't understand. Well, for those of you who don't know, there was this art group that had a residency in the World Trade Center known as Gelatin. And they had this art installation called The Bee Thing in the World Trade Center. And I'm going to assume you're not familiar with this, especially if you have not done a lot of research into 9/11. So I'm actually going to read this whole article so you know what this is, because it's important to have a full understanding of it when we go back to Huey Lewis and the News. Why is Gelatin's Bee Thing troubling and mysterious? Gelatin is made up of 4 artists from Austria. At first, these 4 artists were known as Gelatin, but changed their name in 2005. They are known for intriguing projects. Amongst them is their pool installation on the roof of a museum, or their gigantic plush boy, a 55-meter tall pink rabbit near Genoa, Italy. I mean, what a just weird thing to do, right? Look at the face on this rabbit. You could imagine various implications of this along the lines of going down the rabbit hole, following the white rabbit, Alice in Wonderland, that whole thing. But just a really creepy face they put on this bunny that's just sitting out in the middle of Italy somewhere at some point. I think they said 2005. But that's the kind of artists we're dealing with here. And this is a picture of them standing on it. The Bee Thing. Over time, they have ventured into other art forms. Their project, The Bee Thing, began in March 2000. This time, the group allegedly removed one of the windows on the 91st floor of the former World Trade Center complex in New York. Maintaining complete silence about their daring endeavor was paramount for Gelatin. The risk of hefty fines for damaging a national treasure loomed large if their covert mission had been exposed, adding to the intrigue surrounding their project. You really have to look for the dual meaning in everything that is written about them, especially when they write about themselves. And we'll get to that. But there's a lot of dual meaning, subliminal NLP going on with how they write about themselves. And I'll try to point out some examples just so you know what I mean, but you got to learn to do this on your own as well. After this, they installed a narrow balcony and a helicopter was flying around the scene, capturing every moment which would later be documented in the book The Bee Thing. After the project concluded, the World Trade Center was involved in one of the most prominent events of the last 100 years. Gelatin's project at the World Trade Center was a highly secretive and illegal endeavor. Situated on the 148th floor, they concealed construction materials under their clothing and meticulously crafted a functional load-bearing balcony. This doesn't make any sense to me, how in the official Gelatin materials, they say they were on the 148th floor, but there weren't even 148 floors in the World Trade Center. So they're putting that number there for a reason that is probably coding something. I don't know what. But it was the 91st floor where all of this took place. So I don't know why they keep putting the 148th floor in what they write about it, because this article that I'm reading here just copy and pasted what they wrote about it. During the covert construction process, they carefully removed putty from an unopenable window on the 148th floor using suction pads. At 6 a.m., they posed on this balcony, capturing the moment from a helicopter, an integral part of the project's documentation. Gelatin's artistry extended to capturing their work from the sky, resulting in a remarkable and audacious photograph that captured the essence of their covert project. And we'll get back to this picture eventually. Well, maybe I should just do it now. If you focus on all of the words that are being used in association with this art project, quote unquote, you can see how they are all kind of loosely referring to bombs in one way or another, right? You have BB-18 here on all the boxes that they stacked in their little area. And BB-18 is intended for use with fuse holders. So BB-18 is associated with fuses. And then you have themselves named the Gelatin art group. And obviously, there is a form of gelatin known as blasting gelatin or simply jelly. Gelignite. It's an explosive material. So you have gelatin and fuses. And the B thing, which could be referencing anything that starts with a B, but what is commonly associated with gelatin and fuses and putty. Remember, they made reference to putty. Well, it's a bomb, right? You've seen these in movies depicted all throughout its history, how they put these bombs together. And then in the actual helicopter that they were talking about, and then in the World Trade Center itself, on the 91st floor, they were all wearing these E-Team hats. Which again, in the context of bombs and gelatin, you could think of that as the explosives team, right? So you have all of these references to bombs, explosives, and the coincidence that this art group was on the 91st floor of the World Trade Center that would later be hit by a plane and explode, causing them to fall down. So they had the E-Team hats on, and part of the art installation was choreographing the lights in the World Trade Center to say E-Team. I actually have what they said about that up here. The name of our collaboration, E-Team, is generic. To illuminate it on the north face of Tower 1, World Trade Center, we would use the windows between the 89th and 95th floors like elements in an LCD. It would require 279 darkened and 127 lit windows, and the help of those respective offices. We contacted 14 businesses and provided them with floor plans detailing which blinds to open and close. The support we received from the offices and their employees was integral to illuminating our name. And this is from the actual E-Team in March of 2001. So remember, they're wearing the E-Team hats as they do the quick pick, they called it, taking those pictures on the 91st floor in that window via helicopter. And then they later have this E-Team stunt where they get it to say that here, and then as you can see, the actual plane hit the World Trade Center in almost the exact same spot. They said it was the 89th to 95th floors, And then when you get into the official account of 9/11, depending on the source, they say it was anywhere from the 94th to the 99th floors. This art installation was on the 91st floor. So they were doing it right below where the actual plane would strike the tower. And they just so happened to do this E-team stunt right in that spot. So we are beyond the realm of coincidence now in the relationship between this Gelatin art project and what happened on September 11th, 2001. And it's only going to get crazier, I gotta warn you. But yeah, I started going into all of that, just noting how a lot of the phrases that they used surrounded terms that are commonly used in bomb making. Whether that's explosives, bombs itself, or what you use as far as the elements go. Gelatin, putty, covert operations, fuses, BB-18. And you can see in this image itself how they sort of posed for the ritual that was taking place, where you have the infrastructure looking like the two towers inside the building. And you have this man between the two towers, and then you have this shadowy figure overlooking what's taking place, and then the person in the background that has what looks like a remote control, where they're going to detonate this whole thing that's been orchestrated by these shadowy forces. And then you have the naive, unsuspecting dupe between the two towers just kind of looking out the window at what's about to transpire. The balcony was prefabricated construction created by the team. After the installation, only one person at a time should be able to stand on the balcony. Another requirement was to camouflage the structure to be less visible to all the passerby on the street. To do this, the team had to remove one of the windows. They had to be very professional to minimize mistakes and injuries and prevent damaging the skyscraper. Gelatin ensured that they were following all legal processes. An attorney guided them on how to behave. Surprisingly, there was no surveillance on the facade of the World Trade Center, making the covert operation possible. Again, the dual meaning there. Surprisingly, there was no surveillance on the facade or the outside of the World Trade Center. It was all at the floor level based on what happened in 93 at the World Trade Center bombing, which made the covert operation possible. You see? You see how that's a dual meaning phrase in relationship to what happened on 9/11 itself. This lack of security on such a prominent skyscraper raised questions about the effectiveness of security protocols. Remembering that they did this in the year 2001, a few months before it actually happened. As a unique marker of their presence, Gelatin left behind an old piece of chewing gum adhered to the exterior of the World Trade Center at a dizzying height. This small but powerful symbol serves as lasting proof of their bold intervention. And really, you could view Back to the Future and everything like it as the chewing gum here, right? Where they leave it stuck in the collective mind in the form of this video that will exist as long as digital devices that can play it exist. And it serves as that gum that was metaphorically stuck to the World Trade Center itself by this art installation. That proof of what they did, what they achieved covertly, will forever be stuck to culture in the form of those movies that encode what they did in a sublime way. Various witnesses, including Gelatin's art dealer, were present during the project. However, some individuals who were once involved now deny the project's existence, further deepening the enigma surrounding the endeavor. The Bee Thing book was published in 2001 with new copies retailing at $500 on Amazon. It is a hardcover volume with drawings, color photographs, and a few texts describing the events on the 91st floor of World Trade Center in 2000, approximately 335 meters above ground. The Bee Thing book documents the project in a section of glossy color photographs containing mostly drawings and calculations. The book was obtainable in very few places, including an art gallery in a frosted storefront on Broadway near Franklin Street, and was printed in a run of 1,200 copies. In the book, the individuals have all turned away from the camera but appear to be of college age. The 55 pages publication shows photos of each person at a time standing on a tiny balcony. And then these are the real weird sketches that they used as a part of this alleged art installation that is contained within the book, I believe. And I'll include a link to this. You can actually watch a video of the helicopter that was out on the day where they took these pictures from the 91st floor. The act was a crime against corporate law, to be a fact. Depression inside, amazement outside, and it looks like there's all kinds of little charges around the World Trade Center, noting that it would pancake, it would depress inside, and there would be amazement outside. To surprise or astonish greatly, fill with wonder, astound. All kinds of weird stuff in these drawings. You could probably spend a few hours going through them if you really wanted to. But I don't want this video to be that long, so I'm not going to go into this anymore. You can research this on your own if you want. Gelatin's project draws comparisons to historical art pranks and audacious acts, such as Philip Petit's high wire walk between the Twin Towers, creating a sense of artistic lineage and historical context. The project at the World Trade Center has taken on the qualities of an urban myth. The affair has been shrouded in controversy, with rumors and denial circulating among the downtown cognoscenti, creating an aura of intrigue and mystery. Experts in digital image manipulation have analyzed the content within the Bee Thing book, specifically the photographs and visuals related to the balcony project. These experts examined the images carefully and did not find any discrepancies or signs of digital manipulation, which could suggest that the balcony project was indeed a real event rather than a hoax. Their analysis of the images indicated that they appeared authentic and unaltered, supporting the notion that Gelatin's covert balcony installation may have actually taken place as documented in the book. The Port Authority of New York and New Jersey reacted with disbelief and outrage when shown a copy of The Bee Thing, but their own investigation found no evidence to disprove it. Some people think there was a close connection between the artists and the September 2001 perpetrators. Although this has never been proven, some people are still furious, with the art project instantly troubling questions about the security of the high-rise. They feel that this publication tells us something about the vulnerability of the World Trade Center, which later provoked more debates after the attacks. And it's like, no, they're not telling you something about the security of the World Trade Center. They're telling you that they knew it was going to happen and they were somehow involved in it. And a lot of people take that to mean that these quote-unquote art students were the ones who actually, wired the building with explosives. And it's like, well, you can't prove that. So that's not what we're saying. It's just they knew on some level and they symbolically depicted an aspect of what was going to happen that could later be referred to as art and coincidence. Because that's just how they tend to do things. It's that gum that was stuck to the World Trade Center, right? This is part of that residue that they can point to as evidence that they pulled off this great feat of murdering all those people on that day in this mega blood sacrifice ritual that would lead to the fulfillment of all their hopes and dreams, whatever those are, I don't know. Some are also confused by the untidy sketches, which appear to be jotted in ballpoint. They seem to contradict the precision required to pull off such a covert installation. People have called The Bee Thing a successful prank as statement by Austrian students, others troubling and stimulating. The quality of the photos makes it challenging to determine what was going on, creating mystery around the events. Conclusion: The Bee Thing is considered by some a troubling and thought-provoking project. However, it is safe to say that it was wholly original and bold. Gelatin's project pushed the boundaries of artistic expression, testing the limits of legality and risk. It remains a testament to their unwavering commitment to creating provocative and unconventional art in unexpected locations. Alright, that's a brief overview of what The Bee Thing was, in case you were unaware of it. Now, let's go back to Huey Lewis and the News, and its Plan B album, released in July of 2001, and take a look at the track list. And on the track list, we have number 6, Thank You number 19, and number 7, Plan B. Remember, it was the 91st floor where the Gelatin B thing art project transpired. Number 19 or 91. Thank you, number 19 and Plan B, tracks right next to each other. Do you see how that could be viewed as the B thing on the 91st floor of the World Trade Center? In Huey Lewis and the News album, Plan B, released a couple months prior to September 11th, 2001. Remembering the 9/11 in the Huey Lewis and the News, and the fact that this song was the anthem chosen for the 9/11 trilogy Back to the Future. Thank you, number 19, Plan B. Now, this is from Spike Art Magazine, Gelatin's The B Thing. And remember, they changed the name. It was Gelatin, like the explosive material, until 2005 when they renamed it to Gelatin with an I. And we can imagine why they would do that, given the associations here, as people began to become aware of this thing. But this is where it really gets crazy. The Austrian collective's implausible architectural intervention on the World Trade Center's 91st floor became an eerie memorial to turn of the millennium New York. In 2000, I was in New York where I still partly live. Gelatin had one of the artist residencies on the 91st floor of World Trade Center 1, offered by the Lower Manhattan Cultural Council. All 4 members of the collective were there when they hatched the idea of attaching a balcony to the outside of World Trade Center 1, directly facing the Millennium Hilton. I visited their studio while the project was underway in 2000, and I remember being almost unable to move because they had stacked dozens of cardboard boxes from floor to ceiling inside a basic wooden room in a room that they had constructed during their time there. Remember, those were the BB-18 fuse boxes. The effect was that a section of the windows facing out toward Manhattan was obstructed by the boxes and interior structure. When one entered the studio space, there was a small area that was completely closed off, a corner of the room that was camouflaged by the boxes. The idea was that someone familiar with the group could easily assume that the art, quote unquote, they were working on was the boxes or in the boxes or some sort of combination of the two. The reality was that the actual project they were working on was behind all of this and well hidden. Again, the layers to this thing. Symbolically, they are doing a mini 9/11 ritual, right? This covert operation that's hidden by the reality of everything that's around on the surface level. People could have seen what they were planning to do on 9/11/2001 if they had the eyes to see beyond the surface level, because they showed you, right? In things like Back to the Future. And that's this picture. Somebody comes in and they say, oh, this is an art group. They must be working on stuff in these boxes, or the boxes are a part of it. And yeah, there's nothing nefarious going on here. But little do you know that they're engaged in this massive conspiracy to do something illegal and remove this window from the World Trade Center so they can put this balcony out and do this quote-unquote art project. But that's the same thing that 9/11 was, happening on a different scale with the two towers themselves that they were inside of. And again, it's like the Mossad quote at the beginning, where they spent an entire decade waiting for the perfect time to detonate those pagers and walkie-talkies. So you have to imagine that what they pulled off on 9/11 was similarly planned decades and decades and decades in advance, meaning it probably wasn't these 4 art students that wired the building, you know what I mean? Or even provided cover for that to go down. If something like that was going on in terms of a controlled demolition, I mean, they would do that over many years and hide it very well and have a plan in place that was flawless to pull something like that off. That partially would relate to the lack of security in the building, right? But just in general, it wouldn't be something that was done in a few months before the event transpired. And I only bring that up because that's how they will discredit you if you bring this up. They'll say, oh, what, you think those art students did 9/11? You know, they'll say something like that is kind of absurd on its face. And it's like, no, this is a multifaceted agenda, and it was a multifaceted apparatus that laid the foundation to pull it off. This being only one small part of it. That seems more metaphorical in terms of what they were going to achieve through it. And then, like the gum that they stuck to the tower, it could be viewed as that residue that would be for those in the know, a memento for them. This art project in the actual real world that they conducted that they can always point back to and say, oh man, look how smart we were. Look what we did. Look what we achieved. And they don't even know. It's our secret. Which is what Gelatin, the art group, has done in the aftermath of 9/11. They have even denied that they engaged in this. I knew that they were planning to open a window in order to attach a balcony to the outside of the studio, but I didn't quite understand how. One of the obstacles to overcome was that one could not open the windows on the 91st floor. In fact, it was illegal to open any of the building's windows for obvious reasons. Gelatin had to devise a way to carve out the putty that surrounded the window panes and carefully detach the glass. Then they needed to construct a balcony that could support the weight of at least one person. Very early in the morning on a Sunday in March, the partners of the 4 Gelatin boys, myself, and a few other friends were invited to a hotel room at the Millennium Hilton, rented by Gelatin's gallerist at that time, Leo Koenig. If I had a microphone in my hand, I'd just drop it right now. I mean, come on! Let me read that again. Very early in the morning on a Sunday in March, the partners of the 4 Gelatin boys, myself, and a few other friends were invited to a hotel room at the Millennium Hilton, rented by Gelatin's gallerist at that time, Leo Koenig. The gallery had rented a room facing the east side of World Trade Center 1 and also commissioned a helicopter and photographer to document the work. So, the gallerist of Gelatin at the time just so happened, coincidentally, to rent a room at the Millennium Hilton, which we know is the monolith from 2001: A Space Odyssey, which we know had the phone number 212-693-2001, which encoded the date 2/26/93 of the original World Trade Center bombing, and also encoded the 2 towers becoming one in 2001. And it's shaped like the monolith on purpose, as stated by the guy who bought the land and built the hotel, okay, and then named it the Millennium Hilton. This is the hotel that the gallerist for the Gelatin art group rented a room at so they could all watch this quote-unquote art project take place on the 91st floor of the World Trade Center a few months before 9/11/2001. Keeping in mind that the project is called the B Thing, and they were wearing hats called the E-Team. And they, later, after this day, when they were in the Millennium Hilton, pulled this off, which just so happened to be in the exact same place where that plane would strike the tower on September 11, 2001. If you could honestly look me in the eye and say, Steve, I still think it's all a coincidence. I don't know what to tell you. I can't help you, bro. Or gal. Whatever the case might be. Can't help you. If you still want to believe all of this is a coincidence, you're just delusional at this point. I can't help you. Man, just unbelievable. At daybreak, we all watched in the throes of anticipation and fear as one of the windows on the facade of World Trade Center 1 opened and a small wooden balcony, something like a cantilever, was attached to it. One by one, wearing angel wings and brightly colored t-shirts, each of the 4 Gelatin boys made their way onto the balcony. So that we could recognize them from afar, each member wore a different color. I know that many in the press, Gelatin has been incredibly secretive about the project, believe that the B thing never happened, which is why I'm talking about it now. I was there and stood in awe at the sight of tiny human figures with wings standing on a balcony attached to the facade of this gigantic skyscraper. The sight was so beautiful, fragile, and heroic at once. They appeared across the street as tiny blips among the windows and reflections. Okay, now I need you to brace yourself for this. Okay. I like to think that not much surprises me at this point, but this is something that had my mouth gaping open when I read it, and I could not wait to make this video. Okay. Here we go. Oddly enough, the helicopter and hotel photos were meant to serve as exhibition material for Gelatin's show at Leo Koenig Gallery the following year. Whether by coincidence or some unnameable cosmic force, the opening day of the exhibition was September 11th, 2001. I mean, come on. The opening day of the Gelatin exhibition from the B thing on the 91st floor of the World Trade Center, right below the E-team, where the towers would later be struck by a plane on September 11, 2001. The opening day of that exhibition was coincidentally September 11, 2001. Unbelievable. Whether by coincidence or some unnameable cosmic force, the opening day of the exhibition was September 11, 2001. And the guy, Koenig, who was Gelatin's gallerist, at the time, he's the one who organized the room at the Millennium Hilton to watch the thing unfold, and they later celebrated there the next morning. That's in one of these articles here. I don't know if I'll get to it or not. They had what they described as a decadent celebration there, the night before and then the morning after. Tobias Urban from Gelatin was staying with us when I received a call from my brother in Athens that a plane had crashed into one of the World Trade Center towers. In disbelief, Tobias, my partner, and I all went to the rooftop of our building at the time and watched as the second plane crashed into the second tower and the gigantic structure burst into flames and eventually collapsed. Looking back now, the beauty and innocence of the bee thing is stronger than ever, shrouded in the horror of that destructive moment in 2001. What is more remarkable to me even now, some 20 years later, is that the true documentation of this project is much more than the amazing book that was released in 2001. The fact that this project really took place can only be confirmed by those who were either part of the project or among the few that witnessed it. The bee thing is still one of my favorite works of art, and being reminded of it in the context of the recent history of Lower Manhattan, and particularly those events that changed the US in a major way, makes it all the more powerful. The work was so playful and intelligent in a Gelatin way. The boys used their residency to push the parameters of the site itself, reflecting the conditions of power, money, and the icons of New York at the time. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Oh, I wanted to get to this in terms of the overall meaning of what they were going for with this whole quote-unquote art project. This is quoted from somebody involved with it. The project balcony has been developed from a very strong desire to step outside a window on the 91st floor. The balcony is about the feeling you have when you stand on it and about the pleasure you absorb when being totally dependent on a structure and atmosphere you have created yourself. On September 11th, we collectively lost control over the structure and atmosphere of our lives. Perhaps we all need to step outside that window and be suspended by something, call it art or faith, for just a moment. I can say for certain that contemplating the bee thing has been one of the healthiest, happiest things I've done recently. So you can see how, from their perspective, they would view their creation of the 9/11 ritual as that balcony. That thing they created themselves, and they stepped out in this dangerous, thrilling way onto it, sort of suspended only by their faith in themselves to actually pull this thing off. And that's probably the deeper meaning to the actual ritual they conducted with this art installation, in terms of what it meant for what they were doing in the broader sense of the 9/11 blood sacrifice ritual itself. So it's just, I can't get over the fact that their gallerist, I don't know if I'm saying that word right, but the person who was in control of showing their work in the gallery, this Koenig guy, he's the one who puts them up in the Millennium Hilton, which involved that hotel into this ritual, knowing it would later be a part of the 9/11 ritual itself. And the exhibition that same guy, Koenig, had planned for Gelatin was September 11, 2001. I mean, you just can't make something like that up. It was clearly planned in advance. There's nothing else I can say to you at this point if you can't see that. Not only was it planned in advance, there were a lot of people who knew what was going to happen, and they put it into stuff like this and called it quote unquote art. Oh, this is about Koenig, who would actually be a good person to research if you are good at that type of thing. I know his father is kind of a famous artist in his own right in Germany, and he recently died. But I didn't go any further than that. The night before the bee thing, Mr. Harris said he rented a top-floor suite at the Millennium Hilton across the street from the Gelatin studio and invited people to what guests described as a night of decadence. Near dawn, he and several others took cameras and boarded a helicopter, communicating with Gelatin via cell phone. And then that's when the whole thing transpired, that you can watch the video on, see the helicopter and all that. Afterward, Gelatin appeared at the hotel where their success was toasted at a euphoric breakfast, according to 5 other witnesses, including Tanya Corinne, a video producer and writer, and David Leslie, a performance artist. We just applauded the gutsy originality of it, Mr. Corin said. I think we all left feeling, wow, we just did something amazing and nobody knows. Of course they did that in the Millennium Hilton, the Monolith Hotel. 2001 A Space Odyssey, the evolutionary leap, as it were, that was desired to be achieved in our collective minds through this event. And at the time, nobody knew, right? They pulled off that whole thing and nobody knew. I mean, of course, right away, some people suspected that there was something not quite right with the official story, but nobody knew the extent of it. Nobody knew what they had actually pulled off, like we do now. So in that sense, this art installation was sort of a fractal of the 9/11 event itself that they put out into the world before the event. So now in this context, we go all the way back to Huey Lewis and the News and note the picture here from their latest album, Weather, which has them all standing in front of the Golden Gate Bridge. There are many people out there who feel like the Golden Gate Bridge will very literally be destroyed in a coming mega ritual similar to 9/11. They may be right, they may be wrong, I don't know. But this would be something you would want to add to your research if you're into that kind of thing, because the fact that Huey Lewis is connected to Back to the Future and 9/11, and also San Francisco and the Golden Gate Bridge, might give you some more threads to pull on to maybe figure something else out along those lines. Just a suggestion. But yes, in 2001, he has the Plan B album released in July of 2001, and you have Thank You Number 19 and Plan B. Or the B thing on the 91st floor of the World Trade Center, which obviously was pointing towards the real thing that would happen on September 11, 2001, right above the 91st floor. And again, you can get lost in the details with all of the fake conspiracy theories that they put out there as a part of this ritual. So you would be confused and spend years looking down various rabbit holes thinking, oh, is it that? Is it this? How did they do it? How did they bring the towers down? Well, who cares, right? It doesn't matter how they brought them down. Look, we know they did it, right? I mean, this is smoking gun evidence. If I presented this in a court of law, beyond a reasonable doubt, guilty, I got my verdict, okay? So forget about the details. It doesn't matter. Someone knew when and where all of this was going to transpire, and they put it out in the open for anyone to see in a quote-unquote art installation.